it is that time to bring in someone whom we have not had here on the morning show in too long. And when I noticed that she was kind of busy this past weekend, I was like, we've got to have her back. John, what are you doing? You're waiting entirely too long. You have to go ahead and hit the button and invite this person back on the morning show because it's been entirely too long. And for this, we bring back in Marion Crowder. It's been entirely too long, you.
It has, man. What you built that intro up. I feel honored.
Well, but I mean, you've been
It's a long time.
You've been one of the OGs here on the morning show with your time in USL League One and then drifting over to Ess-E-Cee soccer and all this kind of stuff. And so now that the dossier is going sideways and in 3 dimensions and all over the place, we got to have you back. And considering that last weekend it was a timely appearance for the news on the soccer planet, I'm like, ooh. And, I text Marion. It's like, hey, what are you up to this week? And she's like, yeah, Wednesday. Okay.
Absolutely. I always have time for you, my man.
Well, we'll get to the Ess-E-Cee part coming up after this. But you were very, very busy with a very cool moment involving U.S. soccer on the whole. You got to see the beginnings of the USL Super League.
Yeah.
What was it like to be there for the grand opening of the department store there where they cut the ribbon, open the doors, everybody goes in, and there's this one photo that has stuck with me, and I guess it was a drone shot of from high above one of the end zones, and you see the Carolina Ascent colors as the sun is setting over the stadium there. What was it like to be a part of the beginnings of the USL Super League?
Well, I'm actually going to bring it back. I don't know if this is the last time we've talked, but if it has, it really has been too long. But I'll bring it back to something of relevance for both of us. Remember Tormenta, the League One final, right?
Yeah.
So that weekend, actually. So obviously, for any kind of final or anything like that, the league's there. We've got personnel. We've got reps. We're all just catching up, and Super League had been mentioned, right? Like Super League was in the works. We are trying to get this thing up and off the ground. So John, it has been since I saw you in Tormenta. What year was that? Was that 21?
Too long ago.
21 or 22, right? And so to think back to those conversations, to what they thought this could be, and then kind of the question of, okay, how do we make it a reality? How do we make it happen? And then to see all of it actually come to life in such a big way. 3 home openers, 3 sellouts. It was just one of the coolest things to be a part of, because you always start to see this momentum shift, right? And you're like, you hear about it. You're like, oh yeah, soccer's growing. Women's sports are growing. It's all growing. But then to actually like witness it firsthand was really a special experience. And, Super League is something that I hold dear to my heart, because I feel like it was exactly what I needed coming out of college as a player. And so now to see the opportunities unfold for so many others, it has just been one of the coolest things.
3 home matches this past weekend, 3 sellouts.
Crazy.
In Charlotte, you had north of 10,000 folks in the building. Yeah. There's some great atmospheric photos from inside American Legion to show.
And their kids.
And Ascent are going to take me to the poorhouse because of all of the cool jerseys and things that they have. Yeah, I'm going to have to talk to our friend Ashley Ess-E-Cee, and it's like, can you cut me a deal here, Ashley, and help me out with this kind of stuff? Otherwise, I'm gonna my credit card will be smoking from all of the activity that's there.
If you talk to her, just put in a good word for me, and
I will absolutely. You had 10,000 in Charlotte, and you had 5,000 in the other 2 venues. Spokane, where it's growing at the USL League One level, it was growing across the board. So right now, USL Super League is 3 for 3. What did you think about the quality of play that you got to see in the first weekend?
Yeah, I think that we have to remember for this league in particular in its launch, they haven't had a proper preseason, and every team has been kind of on a different timeline. So you talk to teams like DC Power, who they are still bringing in new players, right? They really just got their roster finalized not too long ago. And then you think about teams, some of the teams like Tampa Bay, who have a player like Jordan Listro, who really has had a longer preseason than she's ever had because she didn't renew her contract. She's been off for probably close to, 8 months or so. And that's in the world of soccer, that's like unheard of. Right. And so I think that you could tell that I think you could tell the teams who had been together longer for their entirety of the roster, the players who had really had a full preseason to think about it versus the teams who truly are still getting to know each other. With that being said, there's also no scouting, right? None of the teams that we called this weekend had scouts available to them. So I think that we saw Super League at its most raw this past weekend. That being said, the Dallas Trinity. So I called the Spokane game. I wasn't on, but I was on the Carolina game, and then I was on the Dallas Trinity and Tampa Bay game. That match through and through, tempo from the first whistle off the charts, and it lasted as well. And obviously, like we always have to, and this is the same in the college game, this is the same in any early pro league. 90-minute fitness comes a little bit later, right? And so I think that you could tell that there were some fatigued legs, but even that though, the talent, some of the quality that we saw, especially from that Dallas Trinity team, I mean, they're going to be a problem immediately. Here's what I want to see happen, obviously, for the Super League, is that I don't want there to be this gap, right, of the teams who have this world-class roster versus some who are maybe going at it from like a more academy standpoint. And that's what I was most impressed with this weekend, is that although, yes, the rosters were unique in terms of certain construction, they all really followed the same guidelines. They all were like, we need mature players. We need veterans who have been in a pro environment before to show the younger ones how to be here. We need local talent, which I love to see, because when you're talking about a place like DC, you're talking about a place like Tampa, you're talking about a place like Dallas, right? Those are hotbeds, Carolina, hotbeds, right, for women's soccer. Why would you not go get the local talent and also bring in the fan base that comes with that? So I love to see that. And then the third thing was the coaches that we talked to, they put such an emphasis on this winning mentality. We need players who have been in winning locker rooms, whether that's at the ECNO level, whether that's at the college level, or whether that's with, we saw a couple of NWSL Shield winners out there this weekend. So I was super impressed that although every coach had their own unique spin to it, it really seemed like there was this massive understanding that like we need stability and we need it right away. And in order to do that and to have success, we need to have boom, boom, boom. So I really think for Super League, like you're not going to see too big of a gap, at least in this first year in terms of talent.
Right now, the 8 clubs that are in it in year one, and there's a queue that is outside the ropes, outside the USL Super League, the USL Super League nightclub, where you've got the bouncer and the red tape. There's a line of folks wanting to get in the door when it comes to 2025 and beyond. That is not me. I did not send that email. Carolina, Fort Lauderdale, and there are ties to Atlanta with Tyrone Mears with Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
Tampa Bay, we've had Christina Uncle on the show to talk about everything Tampa Bay Sun. Dallas, Spokane, Brooklyn, and Lexington are the only 2 that were not active in the first weekend.
Mm-hmm.
There are tormented ties to Brooklyn for those that may not know the roster from top to bottom. And then you have DC Power. When you look at these 8 markets, I mean, you're looking at the Carolinas, which we know is a hotbed. You know about South Florida. You know about Central Florida. You're going to get that Alligator Alley. I'm sure the derby with the Alligator Alley with Fort Lauderdale and Tampa. Dallas, you mentioned, you know about Texas. Spokane, I think, is underrated because it's in the Pacific Northwest and it's kind of over there, and you don't necessarily get to see it if you're on this side of the Mississippi River.
Sure.
Brooklyn, I think, takes care of the Northeast for you. Lexington, and we had their CEO on last week to discuss everything going on there with Lexington as they're growing, moving from League One to the championship. You have the $200 million facility and the new stadium that's going to be a part of things. And DC, obviously, DC, you can't sneeze at there. I mean, you're looking at all of these markets where you have an appreciation for the game in and of itself. You mentioned the talent pool, but I think that in these markets, I think you can really make inroads as evidenced by the 3 sellouts. But I think that you're in places where you can really put a foothold in and make these 8 clubs that anchor for USL Super League going forward.
Completely agree. And what I think is really interesting that I saw this weekend, and I'm really interested in terms of Dallas and how they're going to sort out when they have their home opener. But for the majority, and you just kind of mentioned it, for the majority, there's something intimate about USL. I've always kind of felt like that. There's something intimate about the way that the USL does business, whether it's on the men's side and now we're seeing it on the women's side. The way that they make it the community level, right? Like the grassroots engagement. USL Super League, I noticed this weekend, those intimate stadiums, I think that could be something really special. The reason I point out Dallas is obviously because they're playing in the Cotton Bowl, and that's a little bit of a different story, right? So we'll see what that pans out like. But, I go back to that Tampa game, and that stadium that they sold out it's not the biggest stadium, but it is, first of all, it's world class, very, very nice. And it's intimate, and it kind of has this extension of how the USL operates at that grassroots level. That's what the stadium environment felt like. It felt like, you were right there. It felt like you could see everything from everywhere. And then it also kind of creates this buzz, you know what I mean? When you look around and you don't see open seats and you see people standing in the walkways and they're, out at the beer gardens partying, like it creates something about that kind of environment. So to your point, I think that the way that this is structured will be quite unique to follow. And I think there are a lot of things that are going to make the USL Super League unique. One of them being the academy pathway. Obviously, I don't have to tell you this, but anytime you're trying to make a decision as a 15-year-old of, do I go and commit to a college or do I forego an education to go be a professional? It's a pretty heavy decision, a pretty burdensome decision. And so the Academy for USL Super League also offers a really unique path that I think a lot of players will start to take.
Marion Crowder hanging out with us, very, very busy with USL Super League's debut this past weekend, part of the broadcast crew, and maybe we'll get in a little Soccer's in session at the tail end of our conversation this time around. And when you do a game in Tampa, you've got to take a water taxi to the stadium. You have You
Absolutely
have to. And that's the first time I think I've seen anything like that. But anything to draw folks in, even if it's that you sit there and it's like, that's so Raven, that's so Tampa Bay, basically, is to have something like that. When it came to preparation for the matches that you had to call this past weekend, and the fact that they're all available and readily available, whether it's streaming service or what have you, when it came to preparation on your end, what was it like to have to assemble all of this information on all of these clubs and be ready for a debut? Because there's only one chance that a league has for a debut, and you had to be a part of it twice on opening weekend.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing. And don't get me wrong. So, like, obviously, we know as an analyst, play-by-play analyst, prep is a little bit different. At the end of the day, like, it's my job as the analyst to call the 90 minutes that I see. So I think in terms of prep, what we wanted to really make sure was that we got the prep for the league right. And to your point, that's not something that you often have to prep for because you're used to being in these leagues. You know how they work, right? Like when I think Ess-E-Cee women's soccer, other than adding the new teams to the conference, it's the same story, right? But this is something where you wanted to prep and make sure that you understood the values that the league had. You wanted to make sure you understood, obviously, the structure because there is change to the structure. They're playing on the global calendar, which is something we haven't seen in American soccer yet. So you want to be able to talk about that. But you also want to be able to speak to the why behind the buzz, and there is a why. Sometimes I feel like people that they're like, oh, well, it's just catching on just because it's catching on and more people are talking about it. I'm like, okay, that's true. But there is structure behind these buzzing things that are going on. And so for USL Super League in particular, there are sets of whether it be money, whether it be stadium pendings, whether it be minimum salary caps, all of those things have been discussed behind closed doors to get us to this point. And so kind of understanding the fact that like, oh, we just hope that it's going to work. No. the structure has been put in place long before this weekend happened. And so to be able to speak to that and then confidently say, this is why we think that it's going to be around for a long time and it's only going to keep getting better. Like, we needed to have that information. So to your point about prep, like, obviously a lot of players to prep for, because we had a ton of professional debuts over the weekend, which was incredible to see. But I think the more important piece of that, at least for me, was just making sure that the prep for the league was there so that we could do it justice. Because we don't want people to watch this and say, oh, yeah, well, are you going to be here in a couple of years? Like, we want you to watch this and know why it will be here for a long time and why there is so much excitement behind it. Because it didn't just happen, right? Like, there were hard work and there were conversations and a lot of stuff that went into making sure the structure was behind it all.
Yeah, they just snapped their fingers and a league happened.
I swear sometimes people think that, though. They're like, oh, look what they churned out. And I'm like, no. No, guys.
No. This is when you pick up your number 2 Ticonderoga pencil and do your Lee Corso. Not so fast, my friend. It's available on Peacock, and you can rewind it with the
Which
Zone.
is huge.
Yeah, Peacock is huge. Every game on Peacock. The Zone, YouTube, and the 4-letter. Just research your way back. But the streaming services, everything's on Peacock to start things out. Two other folks that I want to 2 more questions about USL Super League, and they have to do with individuals before we get into Soccer's in Session in the Ess-E-Cee. You could not, I don't think, at the top of the pyramid, you could not do this without having Amanda and Betsy at the top of the pyramid to help be the voices and the conscience, I guess, of the USL Super League. To see the 2 of them operate the way that they have to get to this point, what has it been like for you to see the 2 of them at the top of the USL Super League group and administration push everything forward for the league?
There's something, especially because, Amanda was really the one that we had, we had Amanda on interviews and we were seeing her all over social media. And there was something very caretaker-esque about Amanda this past weekend, especially like her interaction with the players, right? How often do you see presidents welcoming teams to their own stadium? She's there before them. She's hugging them. She's pumping them up. She's in the stands with the supporter groups. So it was crazy for me because I've actually never seen a president kind of be that involved and be that passionate so openly. Right. Everyone feels like we have to be so business-like. And don't get me wrong, Amanda's one of the most eloquent speakers I've had the pleasure to talk to. But there was something just very like natural that you could tell this was all coming from a place much deeper than just a business decision, right? Like, this was something extremely close to her heart. This was something that you could tell she put all of her time and all of her passion into. And I think that displayed absolutely beautiful throughout the weekend in terms of the answers that she gave us. One of my favorite answers from her on the weekend was, how do you, something along the lines of how you, it's leaving me. Oh, how you know that this is going to be successful for players, right? Like, what does this mean for the players? And her answer was, we have to ask the players, right? Like, I can't tell you what's going to make this a success for them. I have to have conversations with them and I have to be involved with what they want. And so to be able to kind of hear the transparency of like, I don't have all the answers, but through conversations with players, through conversations with owners, through conversations with front office staff, like, we are going to figure it out together. So I don't know. I was very impressed with the way that they have handled all of this. And to your point, could not have done this if if all of the league as a whole didn't get out and go talk to these communities, right? Talk to these inaugural teams. And I think that the more that they start to do that, the more we're going to see Super League teams rise up in some of these communities. Because I have like a couple off the top of my head where I'm like, that would be a perfect fit for a Super League team, right? And it's just about I feel like it's just about getting them in front of the right people, hearing what Amanda has to say and the reasonings behind this. And I think that we'll see a whole lot more join us soon.
Okay, so right now that we know the 24-25 clubs, the 25 and beyond clubs right now are listed as Chattanooga, Indy, Jax, Madison, Oakland, Palm Beach. Oh, you want to talk about a Florida derby, an alligator Alabama derby? You add Palm Beach.
I know.
And then Phoenix and Tucson for a desert derby there as
Yeah.
well. So, I mean, those are 8 that are on the books for 2025 and beyond. The markets that you have are outside those 8?
I feel like we need something, and I'm saying this from a women's soccer perspective, one of the states that you always hear about in terms of producing top national talent, youth talent especially, Colorado.
Okay.
Right? I feel like we would do extremely. We obviously already got the Colorado Springs Switchbacks for USL champion in there. They have not saying that they should start a team, but they have an incredible stadium set up there. And I know that community. I know that they have the interest in soccer as a whole. I think just a team in general in kind of that Midwestern area would really, really help us. Because like I'm thinking about like BYU and Utah. Right? Like they have some of the top talent that we see. When you think about Colorado, there's always a handful of Colorado natives on our youth national teams for women. So I very much think that the Midwest has something to offer us, but.
Okay. They could play at Widener Field in beautiful downtown Colorado Springs, Colorado.
I'm going to get messages from the Colorado Springs, like front office stuff. Like, what are you doing to us?
What are you doing? You're having us do this. And you're like, look, I'm
sorry now.
I'm looking out for you. It's more dates for the venue, and you got more people who get to hang out there in downtown to see fireworks.
It will also make travel easier, right? Like we've got to think about that. And I think that that's one of the best things that's happened to like USL champion and League One even is just kind of like adding that middle ground. Because from a travel perspective, when you think about teams like Oakland and you think about teams like Phoenix, that's tough, right? That's tough when the majority of your travel is out to the other coast. So I also think just from like a logistical standpoint, you want to get to the point of maybe having divisions, replicate it like a USL championship, you're going to need that market for sure.
You're going to need those through points, especially if you're trying to make it to Spokane, which is not
for sure.
It is not a direct flight, and it's not an easy hop. It's not a 2-hour drive where you can sit there and go from one end of the planet to go see it in Spokane. It's an easy one. All right, last question about Super League before we get into Ess-E-Cee before I get you in trouble with the real world. If I'm playing USL Super League Fantasy.
Okay. Oh God. Okay.
And it doesn't exist, and I'm probably and folks at
now you're gonna get in trouble.
The USL League office is sitting there going, "Why are we playing fantasy for USL Super League?" Give me, and what I like to do with coaches across different sports is I'll sit there and it's like, okay, when we do an open for a broadcast, you know, you and I are in the booth, title over wide, introducing the game, and there's always that players to watch that's always in the open. After week 1, for someone who will be drifting into Super League starting now because of our conversation,
for sure.
Who would be some of the players to watch for folks who would just be getting acquainted with USL Super League?
Dallas, Ubugagu, gotta go. Sam Meza. Those would be my 2. Okay. I think when you're looking at Dallas and what they did on the weekend, every single time that Sam Meza touched the ball, it was problematic. It was problematic for Tampa. No question about it. For Carolina, got to go Vicky Bruce. I think when you're talking about people who can make something happen, it's her. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter what side of the box it is. Whether it's, she gets the opening goal as a center back, but she was also, that's all everybody's talking about, and rightfully so. I actually thought her performance on the back line was outstanding. If I actually had to give her the woman of the match, it would not be for the goal. It would actually be for her defensive performance. I thought that she was incredible. So early on, I'm going with the 2 Dallas players, Vicky Bruce from Carolina, and dare I get, and this is just, I'm an attacking girl. I don't normally give that much love to the defender, so I feel a little off kilter here. But Ashley Orcus, you've got to have her in your lineup, especially if you're doing fantasy. Ashley Orcus for Tampa was unreal, and Ashley is a player that I'm very comfortable with from Ole Miss, and her time as a 3-time All SEC goalkeeper of the year, which, like, let's be real, that doesn't really happen often. And then you kind of like had this question, like, where did she go? right? Like, where does she go? Such a great talent and such a big conference. And now we finally see her back in the States playing professionally, and she did not disappoint. I mean, the only reason, and I'm not taking anything away from Brooke Hendricks, the goal scorer, because that's another center back getting the job done. But the only reason that game ended up in a tie was because of Ashley Orcus's ability to make big time saves that kept it just at a 1-0 deficit. So those would be my top four for sure.
All right. So now let's quickly drift into Soccer's in Session here at SDH, where we look at everything in and around college and high school and all this kind of stuff. Soccer's in session, getting pretty close. And when you look at the Ess-E-Cee, the 30,000-foot view as the schedule is starting to get really hot and heavy with the non-conference stuff, what are you looking at so far from the Ess-E-Cee as the season gets underway?
Well, I've already gotten like plenty of death threats from the Ess-E-Cee coaches on my take from studio show. Not death threats. I'm just kidding. Just kind of like, are you sure about that? Are you sure? I'm like, we'll see. So obviously preseason, right? All we can go on, and we've opened up the season now, and I'm not gonna say it doesn't really count. Obviously it does, but like to me, this is just like an extension of preseason at the moment.
Yep.
And so when we're looking at that, the biggest thing that we can look at is who's returning on your roster, who have you added in the portal. And 30,000-foot view is that Matt Mott, prodigal son, returning home to the Ess-E-Cee, he is making a statement from his portal ads that he got. I believe like 5 of 7, 5 of 6 of them were upperclassmen who had played in the Ess-E-Cee either with him or against him in previous years. So he is not trying to mess around, right? Oklahoma was not where they needed to be last year in the Big 12. So he's going to come back. He's going to make a statement. And then Texas, both Ian Carey and myself picked them to win the regular season. They are returning like 67% of their goals that came from 2 players. And those 2 players also had like 42% of the assists. It's some kind of crazy number like that. My only red flag for Texas is that obviously, and if you guys want to tune in, Mike Watts and I will be bringing you the Texas game this weekend.
There you go.
One of the halftime segments that we'll do is going to be the difference between the Big 12 and the Ess-E-Cee. And so my only red flag for Texas is there's obviously depth to this conference that you guys haven't seen before. Can you compete at the level that we've seen you compete against the level of this talent, weekend in, weekend out? That's my question for Texas. Arkansas, you can never count out absolutely ever. They've actually got some really young players I'm excited to see. That's one of my favorite parts about Arkansas is that they're always going to have 2 or 3 young players that you're like, where in the world did they come from? And then when you're looking at Georgia and South Carolina, right, they're going to be important to note. We got away from the division. So East and West no longer, which is going to be, all the fans are really thankful because we don't have all these crazy scenarios anymore. Yes. But Georgia and South Carolina are still going to be the top teams on that side of the conference. No doubt about it. I think where we need to see some improvement from a 30,000-foot view, you hope that Florida and LSU and Auburn have both improved their strength of schedule this year. I felt like last year they just did not come into conference play prepared enough. They weren't tested as well as they should have been. So hopefully with the increase in strength of schedule, we will see them also improve in the way that they start the conference. And then up in Missouri, Steph, she's gotten some portal kids for sure. But to me, the one that might be the underdog, the one that can cause some chaos could be in Alabama. And I'm talking about Alabama is potentially going to produce the Ess-E-Cee Forward of the Year. If Gianna Paul can have a year, Alabama's going to have a year. And if Alabama can have a year, they can win all kinds of awards like we saw them a couple years ago. And then second to that is going to be Tennessee and Mississippi State. I know I've just gone about every single team. Tennessee lost a lot of big pieces, but they gained a lot of big pieces. And now they've got impact players at every single line in the attack. And then when you're looking at Mississippi State, I feel like James Armstrong has just been quietly working over there, grabbing people from the portal year in, year out, but he's returning some massive pieces. And this is a Mississippi State team that made national news, last year, a team that has slowly become consistent in the national rankings. And I feel like this year might be the year where they really, really break out and do it big.
All right. So what's your dance card before we catch up with you next week?
So let me check my schedule. So I've got a USL Super League game, the Tampa game on Saturday. I've
Okay.
also got a USL Championship. Find me on the Las Vegas Lights Indy 11 game with Josh Eastern, my good friend Josh Eastern. That'll be Saturday as well. And then Sunday, I will be on the Texas-Iowa game as we welcome Texas to the SEC with their first SEC network game. It'll be exciting. Me and Mike will be on that one for sure.
No doubt. And today, for those that are listening or watching to anything in the SEC network, Denver at Texas A&M tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern on SEC Network Plus. You realize that we did basically a half-hour sprint, and we barely touched the surface?
I know, but I also, you're just going to have to start putting your hand up and be like, Marion, please stop talking.
No. What this does is, it reinforces your golden ticket status of crashing anytime you want to talk about anything you want. And it obviously means that now that you are here, you're going to have to come back every week. You're going to have to come back every week to talk about everything that we've got. So
honestly, I enjoy it because it helps me keep my head on straight. I don't have to tell you when you're covering 19 million leagues. You're like, okay, well, who plays for what again? Remind me. It's almost like you take 3 days off and forget everything you did over the weekend.
Not going to happen. All right. So once you get back out into the real world and catch your breath, I'll text you. We'll figure it out.
For sure.
And we'll set it up as like an actual time during the week where you show up to. It's like, okay, so regimented, you're going to be on the morning show and it's going to be at this time Eastern.
Right.
We'll roll from there.
Right. And I'm planning to go purchase, some USL Super League kits. So hopefully I can. Right now I'm repping my little high school team. I got to give them some love. MRA Pats. Okay. Yeah. Yep. And then other than that, I'll come every week in a new kit and we can talk about it.
Now you're just being nasty. You're not playing fair. Marion, go get a cup of coffee. It was great to see you. And we will catch up with you next week. We'll just figure out the when, and we'll talk every single week about Super League and SEC soccer. We'll roll that through. Go get your coffee. We'll catch up soon.
Bye-bye. Good to see you.